afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the first webinar of a 6-part e-commerce series. I'm Ellie Shepherd-Gilbert. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Small Business at Sasfin. We are passionate about enabling the growth of business in South Africa. So when we were approached to sponsor the series, it was an absolute no-brainer for us. Who wouldn't want to be part of a series where business owners get the opportunity to learn from industry leaders on how to build a world-class online presence. It's no secret that COVID caught many companies off guard. The accelerated move into digital ways of working has meant that many business owners have been scrambling to launch some kind of e-commerce offering and digital presence. At Sasfin, we've been building an online presence over a period of time with our Beyond Business Banking platform. And so when lockdown happened, we were poised to service the market in a meaningful way as a digital-first bank. As a business, you can bank with us, you can invest with us for guaranteed returns, you can take your money offshore, and you can get a business loan. In fact, during this time, when most banks were tightening their credit policy, so we were looking for ways to enable the growth of businesses in South Africa. And we successfully rolled out our credit offering, which focuses on females, on youth, and on COVID-affected businesses. But enough about us, because you're not here about us. Let's move on to our stars of the session. And I have the privilege today of introducing the panel moderator, which is Nicola van Ast. She's the co-founder and director of GrowThink Marketing. I have no doubt that you've read her incredible bio when you registered. So I'm not going to repeat that. I'm not going to read that out again. But what I did manage to find out about her, thanks to social stalking, is that she's a mom, she's a marketer, and she's married. But what makes her happy? Her family, ideas that work, and good coffee. And she says in that order. So I think Nicola and I need to have a good coffee together and discuss some ideas that work and then put them into action. But really over to Nicola now to introduce the panel. And I hope that all of you get immense value out of the series. And I look forward to being your cheerleader and following your journey and seeing you take your businesses online.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It is a great pleasure to be with all of you here today and to be kicking off the Online X e-commerce bootcamp. It is a phenomenal initiative that I'm very honored to be a part of. I think journeying with SMEs in South Africa and improving the mortality rate and the business stability of SMEs and their contribution to our economy is a responsibility that we all as South Africans share, and really very excited to be on this journey with all of you. I think we're all on a learning journey. There's certainly a lot that I still need to learn, but what I did want to do today is share some of the online school fees that I and my panel members have already paid so that you don't have to pay them too. I'd like to introduce the phenomenal minds that have joined me today and that bring with them a wealth of experience in the world of online. We also have a bonus panel member, but I will leave her to last. So let me first introduce Donald. Donald is the founder and CEO of Woolsey, an absolutely phenomenal South African success story, and really credit to agility in the online space and the ability to see opportunity and meet that opportunity head on and scale accordingly. And I'll let Donald talk to that a lot more as we go through the course material today and the content. I've also got Shay, who is the founder and the brains behind My Brew Retail, which many of you will know. He's also the co-founder of CMDX, which is a phenomenal tech house and helps businesses and brands with everything from their tech stack to their paid media. The bonus panel member, who I'm really proud to introduce as well, and I'm very pleased she's joining us, is Shera Duval. She's the founder and owner of her own consultancy, Aquila Communications. She's also the CMO for Frank, the smart and simple app that enables anyone to invest. And really, these are the minds that are going to be journeying with us over the next 40 minutes as we dive into how one takes a business online successfully and how to plan for that. And I think, as was mentioned in the intro, COVID, as well as many other factors, have brought about a massive acceleration in online purchase behavior. A trend is firmly established when your grandparents are doing it. And the reality is everyone is now shopping online, and necessity has bred a habit. And the necessity of COVID has now meant that we're looking at massive compound growth in the online space. And that does mean that so many people are going, well, what does this mean for my business? For example, I've historically been in retail. Sure, I'm behind the curve now, etc. And so I think a lot of people have been caught feeling unprepared, whilst others, potentially you are online already, but you just want to sense check, are you really leveraging the opportunity as much as you could be? Are you using the right channels? Lots of questions. And this often creates its own handcuffs because we don't know what to solve first. You're lying in bed. I always call it sort of your 3 a.m. thought pit. All the things that, am I doing this? Should I be on Twitter? Should I be on Instagram? Should I have an app, or should it be a responsive site? Or should I actually just list myself on a marketplace? And so the wheel turns. And so what today is about is, how do you systematically go about planning, and what are the most important questions to ask first? And so that leads us into the first area of discussion, which is really talking about what is the online market opportunity. And it is because we all know there's opportunity. We all know there's a whole bunch of people doing stuff online, engaging with brands, spending money. But really, in relation to your product, in relation to the problem that you are solving, what is the size of the market online? And there are a number of ways you can go about finding that out. Some really simple ways. Yes, do your desktop research, see what's out there, but look at things like search volume. In your category, who is searching for associated keywords, whether they be product keywords, whether they be service keywords? Look at your competitors' search volumes. That's going to give you an understanding of how many people are really looking for what you're selling, or looking to have something sold that speaks to the service that you offer. So that's one of the ways, but there are many ways. And I'd love to hand over to Donald now to talk to some practical advice around how you would go about sizing the online market opportunity. Donald?
Thank you, Nicola. Good afternoon to all the panelists and everyone sitting at home. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today to share with you guys how we have gone through this exercise to get to where we are today. So when it comes to the market size, one of the things that will help you a lot is to look at the, in our case, for instance, we're in the retail space where we sell groceries, deliver groceries from multiple stores. One of the things that we had to do was to look at the size of the e-commerce space in South Africa, just to look at how big that space is, and what was clear was that at the time when we started, about 1% of the sales were processed online, and then it was public. Give you your field, on our side, it was very clear that some of the categories such as groceries were not online for a number of reasons. It was challenging, things like cold chain, all of those things made people not want to buy groceries online. But over and above that, it was clear that it's going to be hard for us to go and exceed the 1% of total sales in retail, because that was the norm, So knowing those industry standards and those things, obviously there's a lot of underlying implications. There's a lot of reasons as to why it won't exceed 1%. Things like connectivity, for instance, will drive that. the speed of the internet, how many people have got access to that. Things like payments as well will drive that number in terms of how many people are really able to shop online. So understanding those figures will then also help you to see if you should be doing this or not, because another thing is with online, most of the business online, most people, if you have to deliver things, they need scale, So if you are taking a market size that's not big enough, and you have to deliver things, then the cost just goes up, So there is no true value in doing that. So understanding the overall market size is key, and understanding the limitations of how many percentage can you get from that market size is very, very important. And one can always look outside South Africa as well, look at more established countries like the US, China, to see how much market share, the likes of, let's say, Amazon or Alibaba will have, or a similar company that you are trying to build the same technology or the same to address the same category in terms of the clientele. If you look at that and then you take it back home, and considering the fact that you don't have, not everybody's got access to internet, not everybody is working, can actually give you a better view of.
Perfect.
And that's what we did as well in our case.
Brilliant. Thanks, Donald. So, I mean, really, guys, thinking about it from, on the one side, demand, how many people would want to engage with my brand or purchase my product online? And on the other side of the coin, access of that universe of people who has the financial access and the internet access to be able to satisfy that demand. So really just think about who wants it and who can get it. And that's your market in a nutshell. I know, Shay, you've had some interesting suggestions on other ways to look at market sizing. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think, so thanks for having me, guys. I think it's quite an important thing that we're going through the next few topics. And I'm going to start off with just using Google. I mean, Google is the biggest tool alongside Facebook in order to see what type of sales we can do, who our competitors are, and for us specifically with Moderator and a lot of our clients that we move their businesses online, we use Google's keyword planner. Basically, it's the data you can get from them it's insane. To put it that way, we actually every day we go through everything, and we actually amazed by the amount of change week by week. So for us, it's the keyword planner. Google's keyword planner is amazing. It allows you to see search volumes, negative keywords as well, so things that don't work. Because you can search for a cake, but that might be a specific type of cake that might work for you. That goes so as far as to actually go on a domain level. So if you've got a competitor, you know exactly who he is, and you can basically go and have a look at what keywords they are using.
Okay.
On top of that, you can use that in your business as well. So that was one way, and another way is very simple. Is something we like to call social listening. And what that is looking at our competitors on social media. So we'll look at their comments. What are people asking? What are the questions that people are asking? What are the complaints that they have? And how frequently do they answer these questions? So if we look at everything that they're doing in the online space, we can then go back and take that data and say, okay, cool. There's a gap over here for having a highlight reel on Instagram, for example, saying, these are the frequently asked questions. And I think for any business, social media is the first place you should be getting it right. A lot of businesses don't get it right there. And from looking at all of that, you can kind of say, look, this company is doing great here, but this is where they're for. And maybe from that, you can take, even if it's 10%, and kind of build on top of your business with that information. So I think social listening, something like looking at the Facebook comments, looking at Instagram, looking at Twitter, wherever that particular competitor or your competitors are playing around in that space.
Okay.
Very important.
Super. Brilliant. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think so, guys, just really practically having a look at the kind of following and the kind of engagement people that are already in the space are achieving on social platforms is going to give you a sense of the size of the audience. So thank you, Shay. That's super useful. I think let's move into the next section now, which is really, okay, so I've identified that there is a viable market opportunity, that I have a product that solves for that community, and that community can access that product financially and via the internet. Great. Now what? Now we need to answer the question, why do I want to go online? Yes, there's a market opportunity, but what am I going to be solving? What is my North Star? And this seems obvious, but it is where a lot of organizations fail online, because what you don't want to do is land up having brochureware, you know, having a site up because I have to be online, right? So I've got the site up, but it doesn't have a whole bunch of utility. So I'm potentially paying to drive traffic to a destination, but I haven't really defined what I want that traffic to do. I haven't got a target. So that's critical, because all the really, really hard decisions you make, especially financial ones, are going to be based on what it is that you're trying to achieve online. And if you've just got a site that's there for awareness and presence, and you're driving traffic there, but you haven't got an objective against what that traffic needs to do, your return on investment is going to be really, really difficult to justify. So I'm going to hand over to Sherry here, and I'd love her to talk us through an example from Frank around how they went about defining their North Star and why it was important for them.
Sure. So I think for me, it's less about the necessity and obsession with having to be online, right? And more about being where your customers are expecting to find you. So our lockdown lives over the last year and a half means we know people are braver, and online might now be the best, and in some cases only opportunity to reach customers. We know it's also a lot more affordable, so of course we're flocking to do that. But this also means that now there's more competition, which comes at a bigger cost. And we've seen that at Frank with a lot of our online advertising. The costs have continued to go up to have the same level of reach. So the North Star is to know who your ideal customer is, understand what their journey is around how they would acquire your product or your service. And then at that point, look at the relevant channels and platforms to be able to reach them. Most of us start off guessing who our customers are, and so often need to experiment through different trial and error to see what resonates best. So don't go out there with a big bang testing everything on every single platform. Besides this being expensive and unnecessary, you also then won't be able to see what is or isn't working. So start with the basics, and then each month slowly start to add or remove while trying to figure out, your measurement and your impact as well. So while going online, start slowly, do the experimentation across the different platforms so that you can see what works best for you, but also what's resonating with your specific customer. Because then not only will you just find that who you think it is, you'll find out who your customer actually is. And sometimes you're right, but and generally you are, but it will help you just refine who that customer base is as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Tara. I mean, Donald, I'd love you to jump in here just with regards to the experience with Woolsey and how you go about setting your targets and defining your objective for being online.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think, with in our case, when we started, it was more like we thought everyone, just eat food. Therefore, everyone's gonna be your target market, But then later it became clear, for me, I would not classify, when I started the business, I was not like a high LSM, for instance. I didn't know anyone who was rich, as an example, But I thought not everybody would just go for it, and then like a month and later, it was very clear that our service offering was for the higher lesson, and that had to do with a lot of things. It was more on the pricing, so the pricing also, like, you have to look at those things. Pricing can sort of like drive, can actually like sort of like eliminate some of the customers. So from our side, we find ourselves with a lot of high LSM customers. To give an example, for instance, we had customers who were spending like 100,000 rand a month on groceries, and like I had never seen that before. To a point where, like, if you look at our top 500 customers, it was just those high LSM customers. So, and I think what's critical is you might not know from day one, in terms of like who your customer is. What's critical is for you to then look at the data and analyze it all the time. So that one customer that comes in to buy stuff, really try to see what else can you know about that customer, and once you start to build a profile of the customers that you want, or the customers that are coming to you, then it helps you to sort of like also like target them. Now you start to look at where are these customers, the higher LSM customers, where do they go, and also the helps you to also, like when you're running a business, for instance, you're gonna have a lot of people who are happy and people who are not happy. Some of them might not experience it. They might not tell you exactly why they're not happy. So some of the things might find that it's price related. If you have a customer who's not high LSM, for instance, and they think they've paid a premium for you, for your product, and they think whatever you've delivered is of substandard. So, but you find that actually the biggest problem there is actually not the product itself. It's actually maybe the affordability of that customer is the problem. So, like, knowing exactly who your customer is helps you to sort of like understand whether if you're on the right track or not. So you always have to sort of like look at the data, analyze it from the word go. When you know your customer, and then you start to target them. Now starting to run ads in the right places to say, these are the areas I want to target. These are the areas that I won't really even target. I want, like Google ads, things like Google ads, Facebook ads allows you to sort of like even like have locations that you want to target, and then over time, then you just start to build up on top of that. So understanding your target market is very, very critical, especially when you start operating, understanding who are you selling to. So the moment you go and say you think everyone is your customer, that's probably incorrect. Even if the aim is to address the whole market, there will be the first adopters, the guys who go in first, and those are the guys that you need to focus on. And once you know your customer, what it helps you with as well, it helps you with how much you spend on marketing. So the moment you have, we call it like a lower churn rate, the guys who actually come to a platform and just leave your platform after a day, because you could run ads that actually target people who are not your customers, and then they come in, but they don't stay there for long. So what you want to manage is you want to go out there, acquire customers. If you have to pay for those customers, you must make sure that the lifetime of that customer can repay whatever you've paid to attract them to come online. So those are critical things to analyze that data in terms of, am I actually paying so much for this customer who doesn't even stay with me for that long, and that's what makes some of the platforms not to make sense. You are getting customers, but you are paying so much for them, and that's what makes, if you look at, like, let's say platforms like Facebook, the reason why they were so attractive to even investors to put money, even when there was no revenue, the guys who were just coming online, but they were not paying anything for those customers. So it was a matter of like, what do you do with those customers who are just coming online in the social media platform, and then finding, okay, maybe we can now introduce adverts, we can do these kind of things to monetize on the platform. So the data to see, how much time people spend on a website, what do they do when they get into a website, what do they click, if it's like, you have a, like a checkout processes, where do they drop off? Those things are things that you must analyze from day one.
Thank you, Donald. I think we're going to go into a bit of that detail now as well in the next section. So you've segued us quite beautifully. I do just want to sum up some of the key points that you and Shira were making there. So I think the key takeouts for me, guys, and learning from these incredible experiences is have a starting point. Have a goal in terms of saying my objective, for example, is to make simple, smart investing accessible to 100,000 monthly active users within the first 2 years. Cool. It might feel like you've plucked that number out of the sky. You shouldn't have, because it should be based on the market opportunity sizing that you've done. But it can be a broad brushstroke, because what I'm hearing from Donald and Shira is that in your first few months of testing and learning and seeing how people respond to your proposition, how people respond to your product, is going to give you more data to refine your targets. So it's okay not to know exactly who and how many right from day one, but it's good to have a target that you can test and then use your testing to refine that target market further. So that really is a key takeout for me. And another key takeout, which we're going to speak to a bit further in the section coming up, is this concept that Donald spoke to of return. And it is critical, especially if you're going to go to an investing community, but even if you're not, if you're self-funded and you need to understand what a cost to acquire, a CPA, a cost to get that customer to do what I want them to do, to buy my product, subscribe to my service, or apply for a service online. What did it cost for me to get that one guy to do that one thing? And what does that one thing cost that one guy? Because that is essentially my return. So if it costs me 400 Rand across my different paid media to get someone to subscribe to my on-demand subscription platform, but my on-demand subscription platform only costs 99 Rand a month and they churn in month 2, negative return. So we've got to think about, the point that Donald was making, to say when you're doing things like your acquisition budgeting, ensure that your product is sticky enough to keep them for long enough to justify the cost to get them. And those are the types of equations you need to have when you plan how many you can get, what it's going to cost to get them, and how long you can keep them for. And that's really now, so we've spoken to, okay, what is the size of the opportunity online for me? Great. Okay, there's an opportunity, it's viable. I want to go online. Why do I want to go online? What problem am I solving online? And really, in relation to the problem I'm solving online, what is my target? What does success look like for me? And that is malleable. You can test and learn and refine that over time, as the panelists have shared. Okay, now how do I do this? Great. How do I actually now take my business online? Or if I'm already online, am I doing it as well as I could be? And this is really the meat of what so many of the subsequent webinars are going to go into a great amount of detail into. So don't feel that we're kind of really skimming over these huge topics today and you're not getting the depth of insight and guidance and practical information that you need. Remember, this is one of 6 webinars. So the next 5 all really go into the detail around the how bit, the measurement, the build. So just keep that in the back of your minds. And also, guys, there is a chat functionality. The panelists are really speaking from deep knowledge and experience. So if there's something you want to explore a bit better or ask a question on, I am keeping an eye on the chat. Please do send your questions through, and if not during the talk, we'll go back to them at the end. So now let's go into how do I do this? Okay, so I think going online as a business, and it's so interesting, in so many conversations I've had with people, for some reason, it can be incredibly daunting for a few people. And I think that is because the unknown is a scary place. I mean, it's kind of like paddling into an underwater cave, and you don't know what's there, so it's scary, and so you're very hesitant. But if we put a spotlight on what's there, it's a lot less scary. And I think we just need to break it down and think about it in the way that we've always thought about business. Why do I exist? For a customer. I'm solving something for that customer. I need to make it easy for that customer to use me to solve their problem. So when we think about how do I take my business online, there's a couple of things. Number one, where do you want to take them? What is the customer destination? Do I want to take them to a website? Do I want to take them to an app? Do I want to go where they already are in a marketplace and list my products there? Or is it a combination of these things? So thinking about the destination, where do you want them to go? And I think then there's a few other steps that I'd like us to talk through, but so as to not talk them all at the same time. Let's stop there for a second and talk customer destination. And Shay has got a huge amount of experience with tech build. I'd love for you to jump in here and give guidance to the audience around how one makes this decision, how one decides what is the best customer destination solution for their business.
Yeah, I think the first thing we start with is, so you might not just be starting an online business. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of, I've got a boutique store selling women's fashion, children's clothing, whatever it is. At that point, you need to look and just figure out, is online going to be my main sales channel, or is it going to be the second? The reason for that being cost. You've got so many different platforms. I mean, I've had a couple of times somebody would come to me with, oh, I need an app, or, oh, I need this, I need that. But they don't understand, because we don't understand the cost of apps and custom development and all those types of things and the time that goes into it. You really need to ask those questions. Is it going to be beneficial for me to do something from scratch, or is it better for me to go Shopify, WooCommerce, WordPress? It's the same with payment gateways and even your logistics, your deliveries, your plugins, your compatibility with other platforms. I'll use that same example. We had a client she's got a boutique store, and she wanted a full first started off custom, and then she read about WordPress and WooCommerce and those type of things. And because she had a store, we said to her, look, why don't you take it as simple as possible? You've got your clothing inside the store. Shopify at that point was the easiest for her. The reason being resources, ease of use, updates, and things like that. Because if you've got to run your store, you need to understand that e-commerce is a completely another monster. It can take over your whole day if you're missing things. There's things like communication. So when we talk about a build or taking your business online, a few things you need to look at is delivery, notifications, things like plugins. So for example, if we're talking about monitoring, which I think we'll touch on later, the platform you choose needs to be compatible with any payment gateway you select, as well as you need to be able to, for example, if you're going to connect MailChimp to it, to contact your customers as well. So in terms of selecting one, you really need to kind of get the one that fits specifically for your business. Anybody can go and do WordPress, WooCommerce, Magento, custom, but it needs to suit your business. Resource availability, all of those type of things. So it's difficult for me to touch on everything.
Yeah, no, Shay, that's great. I mean, I think what's important there, guys, is think about what you want the end user to do.
Yeah.
Okay, and what is going to be the easiest way for them to engage and transact with you, number one. And number two, say there are two options, an app and a website. to Donald's point and Shay's point, you have to think about the cost versus the return. So in many cases, it may not necessarily make sense to invest in app dev upfront. It may make sense to have a responsive site in the beginning, in your interim phases, and use that as your test period to sense check demand, to see how many people come through to your customer destination, to your site, and how many of them convert into a transaction, into a sale. Because that's going to give you the data you need to make the decision to invest in an app, for example. So just think about the costs of the different solutions and what that solution, what data that will give you to help you plan further, help you scale your business, and help you refine your investments. So that's just, I think, a really, really important point, and some nice points there, Shay. I think on payment gateways, I'd love to Donald jump in here, share as well. Just give some, this can be an area that makes a lot of people quite nervous. I don't even know how to go about integrating a payment gateway. How do I do that? Some practical guidance from you guys in terms of how I would go about doing that.
For us at Frank, right, understanding who your customers are, who they bank with, and how they are most likely to pay is going to be really, really helpful. So there's lots of different instant payment options available, but all have different fees. So decide what fees you want to absorb yourself as a business and what you want to pass on to the customers. That's going to play quite a big role in that decision-making process. So Frank, for example, which is quick, simple investment app. So we are limited in the payment partners we're able to work with because of it's important that the fees are kept low for our customers. That's the number one as a business objective. That's very important to us. So we have to have less options, which we know customers love options. We have to have less options because we have to take the cost of them into account. So we have to balance the ease of payment with the impact of the fees and who will carry that cost, which, you know, in many cases will often be you as a business.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Donald, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so another thing is like payment is one of the most critical thing in business. Like, I mean, if you look at like maybe even how the payments are done at the moment in South Africa, you know, like there's been a lot of cries from just customers to say, hey, this 3D secure thing, it doesn't really work well. You know, so thinking about that in terms of like you know, like how do you want your customers to pay after they've been with you, let's say maybe 2-3 times? You sort of like have to develop strategies that sort of like eliminate the drop-offs as well. So in our case, for instance, what we used to do is the first time you go and you will have to go via 3D secure so you can validate that this customer didn't steal someone's card, you know. When you come back for the second time, for the third time, you don't want this the very same customer to still go through 3D secure, because 3D secure sometimes you don't get the OTPs, all of those things. So the payment gateways are very, very important, and to also like give customers like different kinds of payment methods. You know, there are times where you find that guys have got credit card, but the card is just not working. Maybe the bank is offline, all of those things. So you want to have this different kind of payment gateways. Obviously, on a payment gateway, the underlying charges are with the bank itself. So you probably have to. So the first step is to go get a merchant account with a bank that you want to use to process your payments. And what will also help you there is to actually compare these things with different banks. You know, don't go to one bank and say, "This is the bank. These are the fees they've given me." You know, try your luck with a lot of these other banks. And when you have a rate as well, as you start to trade as well, don't stop there. Go back and negotiate the rate. You know, always go back and say, guys, like, I can't afford to pay 3% or 4%, whatever the case is. Negotiate until you get to a point where it makes sense, you know. So don't just be loyal to one bank to say, I've been banking with these guys. Try everything there in terms of the mesh, because those things make a very big difference, you know. and also like
Perfect.
don't limit yourself to like one payment method. Like things like EFTs have been, like recently everybody want to go for those things. So like, go for those things. The guys who can offer credit online, go for that. CODs as well, depending on where you're operating. CODs can be a big thing for the lower LSM as well. So again, knowing who your customer is, and then making sure that if the customers that you're going after don't have a credit card, you have an alternative for them to pay for those things. It's going to be very critical.
Fantastic. Thanks, Donald. Some really good questions coming through as well. So really just key takeouts there from what Donald is sharing, and really importantly, number one, make sure that if you are doing this for the first time, that you are getting guidance from as many banks as possible, as well as from alternative payment solutions providers, because there are many in this country, and there are South African born companies that are really working very hard to service the SMEs, the Yokos, the eCorcos, etc. And they're working with the banks, and they also, all of these players are looking at integrating, to Donald's point, multiple payment solutions. And that's very, very important, because the end user wants the choice. There was a question around trust from Sydney, thank you. And how do you deal with that issue of trust? And it's such an important question, because the average drop-off globally in add to basket, someone who said, yes, I want that thing, and then they got to the point where they had to put in their payment details, the global average of drop-off is 68%. Now, you can imagine how heartbreaking it is to the person who's paid to get that person to that point. So almost 70% is the global average, and trust is one of the leading reasons why. So Sydney, that is such an important question. And that is why the way around that is, it is getting better. When I started my e-commerce journey in this country 5+ years ago, it was the biggest issue, hands down. As the acceleration of online consumption and purchase behavior increases, so it becomes more of a normal behavior, and trust naturally increases. That said, that's an organic improvement. What can we do proactively? Make sure that you've got security buttons on your payments page. Really, really important. People look for it both consciously and subconsciously. They have to know that it's safe. You need to state that in black and white, and have those psychological cues that tell the end user that this is okay, is the first thing. The second thing is, if you're going, like with subscription services, to test the card, to authorize the end user. So R1 is going to come off my credit card. You need to tell me that that's going to happen. It's very, very important that you preempt any fear. So I knew that was going to happen. It's okay. So things like, if you have a trial period, I want to know that I'm only going to get charged at the end of my trial period. So all of those types of things gives the user enough information for them to feel safe. And also, when you have a variation of payment options, that gives the user more control, and control also does help with trust. So those are just some tips around that. Great questions, Sydney. Thank you. Guys, I want to move into the next section, which is really around how you can help your users. Now, we've spoken to this a lot already in terms of what do you want your customer to do online, and how do you make it as easy as possible. So Donald's already spoken to this in terms of drop-off. I want to come back to Shara on this one, just in terms of your experience with your team with designing user journeys, and if there's any practical advice you can give the audience.
Well, actually, mine was quite related to trust for this question. So the number one thing that you want to do for your user is to be able to trust you, so that they will engage with you. So make sure you add your relevant testimonials, the security measures like Nicola mentioned. Get to the point. Don't write long essays. People don't have time to read it. Figure out what people need and give it to them as quickly as possible. The simpler, quicker, more relevant you can make their experience, the more likely they are to return. So don't discount in your rush to acquire customers. the benefit of building a brand, having something that stands for something, having a brand that has consistency. Do some brand building while on your journey to acquire customers, because that will help to build trust. As Frank, being in a financial industry, you can imagine people are very skeptical. So they're like, who is this new company? They're just going to take my money. What's going to happen? And you know, so we get a lot of those questions asked. And we've noticed over the period of time where we were at the beginning to now, people are starting to refer the product. And so customer referrals becomes really, really important, because once you've got a trusting customer, they're always going to be your best advert as well. So rely on your customers to help you tell your story.
It's a really great point. And Shira, sorry, just remind us, how long into the journey with Frank were you guys able to successfully leverage your base for referral?
We started doing various tests right up front, and we've tried different tests. We've worked a lot with influencers where we would give them referral codes, not always super successful. So within the app itself, we're now in the process of busy looking to test different referrals options as well. We've got social referrals. There's various different ways, and we slowly test one thing at a time to see what's going to give us the biggest bang for buck. And also,
the reason I ask is because, sorry, I'll come back to you now. The reason I ask is there was a really great question from someone asking, you know, how long do I give this? How long does it take before I can expect to see return from my online strategy? Broad question and difficult to answer, because it obviously depends on your product. It depends on the decision-making time. You know, it's one thing if I'm looking at purchasing a secondhand car, and it's quite another thing if, you know, I'm getting my much needed bottle of Sauvignon Blanc at the end of a week with 2 small children. So, I mean, it's you know, it really is very, very dependent on what it is that you're solving for. That said, the reason I asked Shira the question is you have to give time for your base to build, your brand to build, because then your brand and your base become their own growth loops through referral, through social sharing, through search, because when your brand starts gaining momentum, that becomes one of your biggest converting channels. So you do need to be in it for a long game.
Because you can damage your business by doing it too soon as well. Because if you go out too quickly offering promo codes and whatnot, then what you'll find is people go, oh, a freebie. Everyone loves a freebie in South Africa, or globally really. So then people will adopt it, and those will quickly churn. So you don't want to do that, right? So you do definitely need to make sure that you're putting any form of referral in the right people's hands.
Absolutely. And you need to also give, you know, when you're going online for the first time, you need to, there was a phrase from Google from many, many years ago, and it's always stuck with me, and I believe it's as true now as it was then. And they spoke about giving an idea the longest spring possible. And really all they meant was don't kill it before it's even managed to come out, that seed has even managed to come out of the ground and start to grow. You know, so often we expect results too quickly, and when we don't see them, we change direction. And that type of knee-jerk reaction is one of the main reasons why so many online businesses fail. If you have something that's worthy of solving and you're solving it well and simply, give the time for your business to grow online and take the feedback from your customers, which takes us really nicely into the last section, which is measurement and data. And Donald was talking earlier around the fact that online businesses, your customers are talking to you every single day. You just have to make sure that you're listening. They're engaging with you. They're going to different pages on your site. They're clicking here, they're clicking there, they're dropping off there. That tells you stuff. And you need to be using that data and learning about your customer so that you can be engaging with them. And Shay, I'd love you to just quickly talk us through in how one goes about analytics tracking, how one goes about setting that up.
Yeah, so I think that's, again, I'll go back to choosing the correct platform, because a lot of it's in the beginning, you can per custom, but all of these things you need to look at the full picture. And I think that's why having this type of webinar and bootcamp is important, because we go across everything. Google Analytics, one amazing tool. You've again countless information there. Google Analytics, Facebook, and Instagram. So the lovely thing about Facebook is because Facebook and Instagram, or Facebook owns Instagram, and what they're doing now is they're allowing to check out through their platforms. With that, they're allowing you to actually see by using something called a pixel. So basically, they track where you're clicking, wherever you can set up your own metrics. So basically, if you want to see how many people are dropping off before they actually hit that checkout button, how many people are dropping off once they've hit your payment gateway, or how many people are dropping off once they've seen what your delivery cost is going to be. We can set up these type of metrics by using Google Analytics, called goal conversions. We can actually have a look and see how many of our goals we've hit. And then also take that with our sales and kind of compare how many sales have I made and how many sales have I lost potentially through XYZ. Internally, what we do is we take all of that, create our own reports, and then the team will sit and we'll say, okay, cool. Is it maybe because our delivery costs are too high? Is the process of the checkout process too long? Is it maybe the product is too expensive? So we'll look at all of those things and kind of pick at it. And the important thing with that is to get that, you need to be able to set up your analytics correctly, set up your pixels correctly, make sure that you're using the correct currency. So there's I would say my suggestion would be to do those courses. They are free from Google. They are free from Facebook. Do the courses. They are long, but they are so insightful and they really help your business to move forward. Okay. And testing. So consistently test your buttons, consistently test that things work and they display the correct information back to your analytics.
Perfect. I think that's really, really important. I think the idea of visualizing the data so that it's meaningful to you and your teams. Yeah. So, as a leader or as a key member driving an online business, it is your responsibility to visualize meaningful data. So, for example, go to your team and say, guys, 7 out of 10 people are dropping off before they complete the purchase. That's a crisis. What are we doing about that? Why are they dropping off? Are they scared? Is there a trust issue? Should we test a trust badge? Are they just using us as a price check? If so, how well are we faring versus others in our category? It gives you a problem to solve. And that's really, really important. So make sure, A, you have the analytics and the data, and B, you're visualizing it so that you can solve for it. Guys, we do have only sort of just under 10 minutes left. I would like to also just go back to Donald for some any closing thoughts on measurement and analytics, and then we'll do a summary and try answer some of the questions we haven't been able to get to. Donald, any further thoughts from you just in terms of tracking measurements? Donald, you're on mute.
Sorry, guys. My internet has been on and off. I think now it's better. Yeah. So one of the key things is obviously, one of the key things is analyze things like, am I collecting too much information when people sign up on your platform? Those things are key. I mean, like now there's a trend, for instance, like. For us, the delivery platforms, all you need is a cell phone number for that customer. You don't really need things like email. Those things, people don't really use them that much, these days. So as a delivery platform, in our case, for instance, when we started, we'll ask you for your name, email address, all of those things. Now, all we ask you is a cell phone number. We validate the cell phone number because we need to call you when we deliver the stuff to you, And then we just ask you to fill in your name and, surname, and then that's it, So things like, for instance, like we also sell alcohol as an example. We won't ask you for how old you are. You know, if you're coming in for groceries and you're not buying alcohol, there's no need for us to collect that information. You know, like when you come in for the first time. But when you start to click on an alcohol and you want to buy it, then we'll ask you for that information, and then we start. So you have to be careful in terms of like what information you're asking a customer. You know, ask as little as possible. That allows you to do the job. So don't just go and ask multiple things to the customer. And again, you have to analyze these things page by page to say, is it too much? Am I asking too much from a customer? Customers don't want to do too much. They just want the product. You know, if it was in a store, they'll just go in, take their stuff and go. But just because it's online, you don't have to ask like everything, you know. So that's critical. So being able to measure those things to see where the drop-offs are, also on the pages, is quite critical to see. Also do a lot of testing in terms of like, are these things clearly visible to my customers, you know? So that is critical to measure everything from, you know, like understanding, putting a lot of analytics on each and every page and seeing where the drop-off is quite critical for any business.
Yeah. And again, back to Shay's point, if you're not sure about how to do that, just attend some of the free online courses, for example, with Google Analytics, and it really gives you practical step-by-step guidance about how to go about setting up that tracking and tagging. Guys, we've sort of got 5 minutes left. There is a question that I want to come to because it's come through a few times, which and Donald, Shay, Shara, any of you, please feel free to jump in. So the question is around what site is the best so to build my website. So is it Wix? Is it Shopify? Is it WordPress? And the question's coming through quite a lot for just different industries. One asked for a digital agency, another person's asking for an office furniture and telecommunications business. So how do you go about choosing?
So I actually started, my first site I bought was off Wix, simply because it was the easiest, without having any development background. So for me, it was start with what you are comfortable with. Things like I wouldn't start off with WordPress because some things can get a bit more technical. In terms of increasing server limits and stuff like that. So I would start off with Wix if you aren't too tech savvy, or by all means, start off with WordPress if you want to learn. But yeah, I would say to get my business up and running, I would start off with something more simple. Even there's Squarespace as well. There's Wix, there's Shopify. So it's entirely up to you and how much effort you really want to put in upfront, as opposed to the time you want to take to get started.
Okay. All right, good. That's good advice. Thank you. Guys, we're going to need to wrap up. But again, I want to go back to what I said in the beginning, that there are now 5 subsequent sessions that really So the last one of the last spoken about today. So number 1, considering the market opportunity. And this is very, very important, because do your homework and just there's not a lot, just because there is online, buying things online, does this agree? They want to measure it. And then, and knowing how you want to measure it is knowing what good looks like. So going back to having a North Star, it is flexible, it is agile, and you will change it as you learn, but you have to have a starting point. Okay, and then really in terms of building a destination for a customer, understanding the cost versus return And that's how you make that decision about, am I doing a site? Am I doing an app? Am I going to experiment on a marketplace first? And then make it simple. So, I mean, this really came across from all of the panelists. And this is really, really important, because another interesting thing is ease of use is one of the top 3 drivers across every single e-commerce and online business anywhere in the world. Is it easy? Could I do what I needed to do in 4 steps or less? Great. Ease of use. So actually, simplicity is much better than perfection in the world of online. If my customer can do what I want them to do simply, easily, and fast, we're good to go. You can always iterate as you go and add functionality as you need to later down the line. And then lastly, data. Data will make or break your business, because it will make or break your budget. Knowing your customer means that you know how to engage with them to increase their propensity to transact with you more and more often. So spend the time to have the right tracking and the right data analytics in place, because it will absolutely serve you in the long run. I think that really just sums up everything we've spoken about today. I'm hugely grateful to Shay, to Donald, to Shira for joining us today and sharing their phenomenal experience with all of us. And I thank all of you for joining us.